essentially every single department within government is struggling because of the years and the waste of improper use of tax dollars to effectively serve our citizens. For decades, we have seen the MasterCard being swiped at every whim and opportunity, but now, Mr. Speaker, the bill has arrived and the collectors are knocking at our door. Make no mistake about it. We are paying today for years of decisions without any foresight to the long-term effect on the province's finances. Not just us, but also our kids and potentially our grandkids if we don't continue to get our fiscal house in order. That is why I stand here today and continue to be proud after supporting not one, but soon to be two balanced budgets where we no longer are spending on the backs of our kids, but are actually running surpluses while paying down the debt. I stand tall with my team, knowing that we played a critical part in enabling unilingual paramedics to receive permanent full-time work and forcing government to pull back on the unnecessary recommendations of the Language Commissioner, especially as it relates to making all nursing homes bilingual. It is because of our place here in the legislature that we have brought changes to the Motor Vehicle Act, which saves motorists both time and money. It was our constant hammering in the media and our negotiations behind closed doors that Cannabis NB is on its way to being handed over to the private sector, where taxpayers will no longer subsidize the sale of marijuana. The people that elected myself, the member from Fredericton York and the member from Miramichi, did so with the intent that we work with government to further our commitments while also holding them to account on every single decision they make. We have and we will continue to do just that. Mr. Speaker, in 2014, I stood at the Picaroons in St. John with both citizens and business leaders, and I laid out our plan and vision for the elimination of the crippling double tax. I remember back then the naysayers said that any reduction in the double tax would never be done. Yet here we are, 6 years later. For the first time, we are witnessing a 50% reduction to the double tax over 4 years. Now, I agree, it's not the complete elimination that we have called for, but it is most certainly a step in the right direction. People often ask me, why is it so important to see the reduction and elimination of the double tax? Well, first off, we're the only province in Canada that continues to charge a double tax on non-owner occupied properties. No other province in this country lays such a burden on its citizens. Now, to put into perspective how crippling this tax is to both businesses and citizens alike, just look at the taxes charged on rental properties. Did you know that New Brunswick is 194% higher in tax on rental properties than any other province in Atlantic Canada? 194% higher than Nova Scotia, PEI, or Newfoundland. If you take the country as a whole, New Brunswick is 306% higher in tax on rental properties. 306% higher in tax on rental properties here in New Brunswick than anywhere else in the country. Do you know that the tax rate for an apartment in St. John in 2018 was $2.95 per $100 of assessed property? In St. John, $2.95. You know what the tax rate is in downtown Toronto? $1.31 per $100 of assessments. That means people in St. John, Fredericton, and Moncton are paying over double in taxes through their rental fees than places like downtown Toronto and Vancouver. That is absurd, and it's ridiculous. And then we sit back and wonder why we have an affordable housing crisis, and we sit back and wonder why the economy can't grow, and why developers won't build buildings, and why investment's going anywhere from New Brunswick. Mr. Speaker, this isn't rocket science. You cannot tax everything as high as possible and expect to have any growth in this province. As a renter in any one of the cities here in New Brunswick, you are paying more in rental taxes than downtown Vancouver or Toronto. Think about that. Why would any business, developer, or investment come to a province where their government will take 306% more in taxes than any other province? The answer is clear in the fact that New Brunswick is the poorest province in the country. The answer is clear in the fact that there's a reduction of 58% in building permits in the province. The answer is clear in the fact that we do not have enough affordable housing in this province. Businesses go elsewhere when they have to pay high taxes in New Brunswick. So we support the reduction of the double tax. And Mr. Speaker, as good as it is to see this reduction of the double tax, it is missing one key element that we proposed in our 2008 campaign platform. It is imperative that when you cut the double tax, that you also include provisions to ensure that tenants benefit from the tax reduction, as do landlords and developers. Sadly, you will not see that in this budget. The provision we proposed included rental rates being froze for a period of 3 years, so the savings trickle down to those who need it the most. In 3 years, the reduction of the double tax would allow for competition among developers and allow for the market to correct itself, thus reducing rental rates for all tenants in the province. But without that key provision, the tenants may never see the benefits of the double tax reduction. I want to ensure the people of New Brunswick that as a party, we will continue to fight to ensure that not only developers and landlords see the benefit of the double tax, but that provisions are made so that tenants too can see the benefits of the reduction of the double tax. Another cut to taxes in this budget is a reduction of the commercial property tax. A reduction of 8.25 cents per hundred is an opportunity for small and medium businesses to keep more of their hard-earned money in their pockets and create incentive for new business startups. The Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, in a survey among their members, had taxes and regulations as the main barriers to business growth and economic prosperity. Every small and medium business in the province is struggling under the heavy load of taxation and regulations. And although the reduction in the commercial property tax is a good step towards economic growth, without a reform of the tax system as a whole, as we proposed, then large industry under this plan and corporate giants will also see significant tax reductions. And Mr. Speaker, that is wrong. While residential property taxes are on the rise yet again, with some jumping as high as 25%, places like the Irving Oil Refinery, JDI, Costco, Walmart, even NB Power will see a decrease in their property taxes. That, Mr. Speaker, is a significant flaw in this government's planned tax reductions. Mr. Speaker, I think the vast majority of New Brunswickers would agree with me that Irving Oil does not need another tax break. NB Power needs to get their fiscal house in order. They don't need a tax break. I'm confident that Costco and Walmart will do just fine on their own. They too do not need a tax break. That is why we have fought for municipalities to have tax classes so that the local cities, towns, and villages can tax based on zoning and the type of property within that zone, kind of like they do in every other province in the country. True tax reform is missing in this budget, and as a result, some of the biggest, most profitable entities in this province are going to continue to ride the gravy train of tax reductions. It has always been our contention that large industry and corporations in New Brunswick are not carrying their weight when it comes to taxation. And while I will continue to fight for small and medium businesses, I cannot imagine that this budget would decrease taxes for the most profitable, especially when residential property assessments are increasing. Again, Mr. Speaker, it's a critical flaw in these tax reductions. So, Mr. Speaker, with this mixed bag of good and bad, the fact that we can run a surplus, pay down the debt, and increase spending to most government departments is encouraging. Take, for example, the increase to education to recruit more educational assistants, or the increase to social development to see home support workers and foster families get a much-needed bump. Health is receiving a significant increase to expand mental health resources and hospital services. Another great move in this budget is a change for advanced care paramedics. Advanced care paramedics offer expanded emergency care that primary paramedics are simply not trained to offer. Currently, there are approximately 80 advanced care paramedics that operate in New Brunswick only as primary care paramedics, simply because they're not allowed to practice their life-saving skills, which is completely ridiculous. Can you imagine an advanced care paramedic that is working a shift but is only employed at that moment as a primary care paramedic arriving on the scene of a medical emergency, and although that advanced care paramedic has all the certification, all the training, all the licensing, all the experience to perform a life-saving technique that they're trained and certified to do, but they can't simply because of policy and protocol? Unthinkable. Mr. Speaker, that type of system puts both the advanced care paramedic and the patient in a very precarious situation. It's mind-numbing to think that for the last few years that governments have allowed this to continue. And for what? The cost to enable these advanced care paramedics to operate in their full scope of practice is pennies in the overall picture and would likely save money in the long run if they can provide immediate emergency care and save lives. We've brought this issue to the attention of the past and current government, and finally, starting April 1st, all advanced care paramedics in New Brunswick will be able to operate in their full scope of practice. That, Mr. Speaker, is a wise and rational decision. And think of what it will do for our rural areas. You know, we talk about the issues surrounding health care and emergency care in rural areas. If you have an advanced care paramedic that's able to operate as an advanced care paramedic in these rural areas, that will no doubt help save lives and help mitigate serious injury. Expanding the scope of practice for pharmacists is another positive step. I was disappointed, however, that optometrists are not included in that. According to the Optometrists Association, New Brunswick is again the only province in Canada where an optometrist can diagnose but not treat things like glaucoma. The optometrist has no choice but to refer a client to an ophthalmologist, which in turn increases wait times to see a specialist, where everywhere else in the country, the optometrist is able to both diagnose and treat for those symptoms. Furthermore, when it comes to expanding the scope of practice for optometrists, there would be no increase costs to Medicare, as these procedures are privately funded. All that is needed is regulatory changes to allow these optometrists to expand their scope of practice, reduce wait times, and do what is convenient for the patient. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I am optimistic that this budget will now indeed pass. Even the Liberal opposition is realizing it would be to their detriment to vote against this budget and force an election. Now, I understand the Liberal leader has tried to back his own caucus into the corner, but it seems like the position is quickly changing. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, with or without a pandemic at our doorstep, this is a budget that any objective person should support, albeit cautiously. You may not like all of its contents and may have some issues with it, as we do, but to vote against it simply to force an election is frankly irresponsible and unworthy of the trust the voters have placed in all of us here in this House.